The mockery in Detective Garrison's laughter was absolutely vicious as he humiliated the 17-year-old girl trapped in the sterile interrogation room. Her supposed crime: desperately claiming that her vanished father was a classified Delta Force operator. Ridiculous, he scoffed. Everyone in the precinct knew the truth. Deadbeat dads don't become elite warriors. His fellow officers chuckled cruelly as they watched this teenager's world crumble, systematically destroying what they assumed was nothing more than a pathetic fantasy born from abandonment. But then the building shook. Heavy combat boots thundered down the corridor. The interrogation room door exploded open, revealing 6 battle-hardened soldiers in full tactical gear, led by a man whose very presence made the air itself seem to freeze. Detective Garrison's smug expression melted into pure terror as he finally understood the catastrophic mistake he had just made. From which corner of the world are you witnessing this jaw-dropping story of vindication today? If this incredible tale of hidden heroes moved you, smash that subscribe button for more mind-blowing stories where truth destroys arrogance and justice arrives when you least expect it. Tabitha Beaumont shifted uncomfortably in the rigid plastic chair, her silver nail polish chipped from nervous fidgeting as she traced patterns on the Detroit Police Department's worn interrogation table. The buzzing fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across everything, especially the thick manila folder marked PRSO OFENTRAST that Detective Klaus Garrison kept dramatically rifling through. The downtown precinct had never felt so menacing. The room was intentionally frigid, forcing Tabitha to wrap her vintage leather jacket tighter around her athletic frame. At 17, she had anticipated many challenges in her senior year. SAT prep may be her first job interview, but sitting in a police interrogation room wasn't on her radar. "Let's review this once more," Garrison said, his voice dripping with the particular disdain he reserved for teenagers. "You hacked into multiple secure government networks, attempted to access classified military personnel databases, and made contact with underground hacker collectives. That's serious federal territory, Miss Beaumont." Tabitha met his gaze, brushing her auburn hair from her face. "I already explained everything. I was searching for information about my father." Detective Miranda Blackwood, the department's youngest investigator and the only woman present, glanced up from her digital notepad with mild curiosity. She had remained largely silent during the 4-hour interrogation, occasionally tapping notes into her device or exchanging whispers with Garrison. "Your father," Garrison repeated with obvious skepticism. "The man who abandoned you and your mother 7 years ago. He didn't abandon us. He was called away on assignment," Tabitha replied, her voice becoming quieter but more resolute. "Black operations." Garrison shared a knowing look with another detective near the window. The kind of look adults exchange when a child says something particularly foolish, the same look Tabitha had endured since her father vanished from their lives. "Look," Tabitha continued, frustration building. "I know he's still active duty. I know he's stationed somewhere classified. I was just trying to locate." "You were attempting to breach federal databases," Garrison interrupted. "That's the only fact we need to establish here." Tabitha's fists clenched beneath the table. 7 years of unanswered questions. 7 years of her mother's breakdowns. 7 years of classmates whispering that her father had run off with his secretary. And now this detective was staring at her like she was nothing more than a delusional teenage criminal. "You don't get it. My father is Delta Force." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Garrison erupted in laughter. He actually spun around, gesturing to 2 other detectives outside the room. They entered, curiosity written across their faces. "Officers, you need to hear this. Our teenage cyber criminal claims her daddy is Delta Force." The newcomers chuckled appreciatively as Garrison continued his mockery. "Someone should probably notify the Pentagon that they've been recruiting wrong all these years. Last I checked, deadbeat dads don't qualify for elite military units." "Maybe she's been watching too many action movies," suggested one detective, a heavy-set man with a mustache and a coffee ring on his shirt. "Or trying to sound impressive to her friends," added another, slouching against the wall with folded arms. Garrison turned back to Tabitha, whose eyes now blazed with fury and humiliation. "Your father abandoned you and your mother. Her subsequent psychological treatment is well documented in your school counselor reports. Inventing this fantasy won't change that reality." Detective Blackwood shifted in her seat uncomfortably, but remained silent as the men continued their ridicule. For a moment, her eyes locked with Tabitha's, but she quickly looked away, returning to her tablet. "I'm not making this up," Tabitha whispered. But nobody was listening anymore. Garrison returned to his position, slamming the folder shut with theatrical flair. "Let's concentrate on the actual felonies committed here. Your fantasy life isn't part of this investigation." Tabitha bit down hard, refusing to let them see her break. Not these men who knew nothing about her father. Nothing about the encrypted phone calls years ago when her father would speak in military codes. Nothing about the desert sand she once discovered in his gear despite them living in Michigan. Nothing about the scars he never discussed or the nightmares that made him shout in foreign languages. Let's examine the evidence, Garrison continued, opening a different file. On March 23rd, you used your high school's computer lab to access a proxy server in Estonia. From there, you attempted to penetrate the Department of Defense personnel database. When that failed, you connected with known members of the Last Vengeance hacker network to request assistance. Tabitha remained quiet, knowing that further explanation would only provide more ammunition for their mockery. Do you deny these actions? Garrison pressed. No. Tabitha's voice was barely a whisper. But I wasn't trying to commit crimes. I just needed to know if he was still alive. This seemed to capture Blackwood's attention again. The female detective looked up, her expression softening marginally. Your father is listed as active duty Army, Blackwood said, speaking for the first time in over an hour. Basic records indicate he's alive. Basic records don't show his location, Tabitha shot back, or why he hasn't made contact in 4 years, or why his last message came from a military installation that doesn't appear on any public maps. Garrison rolled his eyes theatrically. More conspiracy nonsense. Your father is probably stationed at some remote base, drinking beer with his buddies and pretending he never had a family. The casual brutality of the statement struck Tabitha like a physical assault. She had endured 7 years of uncertainty, of watching her mother struggle with depression, of defending her father's honor to classmates who insisted he had simply disappeared with another woman. But hearing a police detective dismiss her father's service so carelessly shattered something deep inside her. My father is a warrior, Tabitha said, her voice stronger now despite the tears threatening to fall. He serves in ways you couldn't begin to imagine. He protects ungrateful people like you who sit behind desks and judge what you're too small to understand. Garrison's amusement transformed into annoyance. Watch your mouth, young lady. You're already in deep trouble. Adding disrespect to a police officer won't improve your situation. Is it disrespect to speak the truth? Tabitha fired back. The detective with the mustache chuckled. The truth about your father, the Delta Force operator. Kid, there's never been a deadbeat Delta Force soldier in military history. That's not opinion, that's documented fact. Maybe not in the public records, Tabitha mumbled. Garrison leaned forward, his patience clearly exhausted. Let me clarify something. You're 17 years old, caught attempting to hack classified government systems. The only reason you're not already in juvenile lockup is that we're still deciding whether to prosecute you as an adult given the severity of these crimes. Tabitha's stomach plummeted. Juvenile detention, adult prosecution. She had never considered these consequences when she began her desperate search. Since we've established you're willing to fabricate stories, Garrison continued an hour later. Let's discuss what you were really after in those databases. The interrogation had intensified, with Garrison using Tabitha's fabrication about her father to discredit everything else she claimed. Each protest was met with a patronizing smirk, each explanation dismissed before she could complete her thought. Maybe we should have you undergo psychiatric evaluation before proceeding, he threatened, clearly relishing the power dynamic. Absent father, mother with mental health issues, compulsive lying. You're developing quite the psychological profile. Tabitha stared at the table, exhausted and parched. They had provided her with 1 paper cup of water 4 hours ago, and her throat felt painfully raw. The room seemed to shrink with each passing moment, the walls pressing closer as Garrison continued his systematic destruction of her character, her family, and her motivations. Suddenly, Blackwood's phone vibrated. Her expression changed as she read the message, color draining from her face. She stood abruptly and whispered urgently to Garrison, who dismissed her with an irritated gesture. Detective, I really think. Blackwood tried again, her voice carrying unexpected alarm. Not now, Garrison snapped, returning his attention to Tabitha. Where were we? Yes, your father, the Delta Force commando. Tell me more about this delusion. Tabitha had stopped responding, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the oppressive silence, marking 4 hours and 37 minutes since she had been brought into this room. Blackwood exited briefly. Through the reinforced glass, Tabitha could see her speaking frantically with someone in the corridor, someone whose face remained obscured. The conversation appeared heated. Blackwood's usually controlled demeanor had been replaced by something resembling panic. Disturbance erupted outside. Raised voices, radio static, the sound of combat boots in the corridor. Garrison. focused on breaking Tabitha's spirit, ignored it all. "Your father isn't a hero," he said, leaning across the table. "He's just gone, and creating fantasies won't make him return." The door burst open. Blackwood stepped inside, her face ghostly pale. "Detective, you must stop immediately. I told you I'm not done here." "They've arrived." "Who's arrived?" Blackwood swallowed hard. "Joint Special Operations Command. They've ordered immediate termination of this interrogation." Before Garrison could respond, the door swung fully open. Colonel Thaddeus Beaumont stood in complete military dress uniform, his presence instantly dominating the room. Behind him stood 5 other Special Forces operators, 4 men and 1 woman, all in full tactical gear, their faces emotionless but their posture radiating controlled menace. Garrison's expression cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally dawning terror as he grasped his catastrophic error. He stood so abruptly his chair toppled backward. "I understand you've been interrogating my daughter," Thaddeus stated, his voice calm but carrying a razor's edge, without legal representation, regarding classified information she could not possibly possess. A senior official in a dark suit stepped forward, introducing himself as Deputy Director Hammond of Defense Intelligence Agency. "The existence of Special Activities Division, Omega, is classified beyond your clearance level, Detective Garrison," the official said icily. "Far beyond it." Tabitha stared at her father, the man she'd barely seen in 7 years, the man whose career she'd defended against endless mockery. Their eyes met across the room, 1,000 unspoken conversations passing between them. Thaddeus looked older than Tabitha remembered, with new gray at his temples and a jagged scar running from his left ear to his collar that hadn't existed before. But his bearing was exactly as she recalled, ramrod straight, shoulders set, absolutely unshakable. The mustached detective who had been lounging against the wall now stood at attention, his eyes darting nervously between Colonel Beaumont and his colleagues. The other detective who had joined the ridicule had moved away from the entrance, giving the Special Forces operators a wide berth. Thaddeus approached Tabitha, his teammates maintaining defensive positions at the door, effectively trapping the police officers inside. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and Tabitha felt the slight tremor in his fingers, the only visible crack in his professional facade. "I'm sorry they subjected you to this," he said softly, then turned to Garrison. "Detective, you will transfer my daughter to my custody immediately." Garrison stammered, his earlier arrogance completely vaporized. "Colonel, there appears to be a misunderstanding. We had probable cause to believe your daughter was engaged in terrorism against classified." "I'm fully aware of what my daughter was searching for." Thaddeus interrupted. "And why? With all due respect, sir." Garrison attempted again, trying to salvage some control. "She attempted to breach classified military systems. That constitutes a federal crime, regardless of her reasons." One of the male operators at the entrance, a towering figure with a battle-scarred face, spoke up. "Colonel Beaumont doesn't require your interpretation. He requires his daughter." Deputy Director Hammond stepped forward. "What your daughter attempted to access, Miss Beaumont, was intelligence related to operations that officially do not exist. Delta Force personnel do not exist in any public database, nor will they ever." He turned to Garrison. "Which makes your mockery of this young woman not only unprofessional, but dangerously close to compromising national security." Garrison's face had gone from pale to gray. "I had no way of knowing." "Exactly." Hammond cut him off. "You had no way of knowing, which makes interrogating a minor about classified military operations without proper authorization or supervision a catastrophic failure in judgment at minimum." Tabitha watched this exchange in stunned silence. For 7 years, she had carried her father's secret, never fully comprehending it herself. For 7 years, she had endured skepticism and pity from friends, teachers, and eventually her own mother. And now, in the span of 10 minutes, everything she had maintained was true had been vindicated in the most dramatic fashion possible. The female operator standing behind her father, a woman with short brown hair and alert eyes that missed nothing, gave Tabitha an almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't exactly friendly, but it contained recognition, acknowledgement. Detective Blackwood, who had been standing quietly by the entrance, finally approached. "Colonel Beaumont, I apologize for your daughter's treatment, if I had understood the circumstances. But you didn't intervene when you thought I was lying," Tabitha said quietly, finding her voice for the first time since her father had entered. "You just watched." Blackwood had the grace to look ashamed. "You're absolutely right. I should have stopped it regardless." Thaddeus's hand tightened slightly on Tabitha's shoulder. "My daughter will be leaving with me now." "I trust that concludes your investigation." "Not entirely," said Hammond, retrieving a stack of documents from his briefcase. Everyone present will need to sign these supplementary non-disclosure agreements. What you've learned today about Colonel Beaumont's unit does not leave this room, nor does it appear in any report or digital communication. Garrison looked like he might object, but one glance at the operators still blocking the exit changed his mind. Of course, standard protocol. There's nothing standard about this protocol, Detective Garrison, Hammond corrected. Just as there's nothing standard about Division Omega. The individuals standing in this room represent years of classified training, selection, and missions that the public is not prepared to acknowledge. As the detectives began signing the documents, Thaddeus knelt beside Tabitha's chair. Up close, Tabitha could see the exhaustion behind her father's eyes, the kind that comes not just from physical strain, but from years of carrying secrets. "I never thought I'd see you again," Tabitha whispered, her voice breaking. "Mom said you abandoned us." "I never abandoned you," Thaddeus answered softly. "Not in any way that matters." "Then why did you disappear?" "That's a complex conversation, and not appropriate for here." Thaddeus glanced at the detectives still in the room. "Can you stand?" Tabitha nodded, rising on unsteady legs. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the interrogation was ebbing, leaving her dizzy and weak. Her father seemed to sense this, offering his arm for support. As they moved toward the exit, Garrison made one final attempt. "Colonel, regardless of your position, your daughter did attempt to compromise classified systems. There must be accountability." The towering operator at the door stepped forward. "The accountability, Detective Garrison, will be determined by military intelligence, not local police. Your jurisdiction ended when Colonel Beaumont entered this room." "He's correct," Hammond confirmed. "This is now a matter of defense security. The police department's involvement is hereby concluded." As they exited the interrogation room, Tabitha became aware of the stares from other officers in the bullpen. Word had clearly spread about the arrival of the Special Forces team, and curious eyes followed their progression through the station. Thaddeus walked with his head high, his hands still supporting Tabitha, his team forming a protective formation around them both. In the elevator, Tabitha finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind. "How did you know I was here?" "I've maintained surveillance alerts for any queries about me in federal systems," Thaddeus answered, his voice low enough that only Tabitha could hear. "When you triggered them, I mobilized as quickly as possible." "From where?" The elevator doors opened to the parking garage before Thaddeus could answer. The team moved efficiently toward 3 black SUVs with tinted windows and government plates. The female operator opened the rear door of the lead vehicle, and Thaddeus guided Tabitha inside. As the convoy pulled away from the police station, Tabitha felt a strange combination of relief and uncertainty. She was free from the interrogation room, but now confronted a reality she had only imagined for years. Her father was actually here, sitting beside her, breathing the same air, and he was exactly who Tabitha had always claimed he was. "I never lied about you," Tabitha said quietly as they navigated through downtown Detroit, "even when nobody believed me." Thaddeus's professional composure finally fractured. He reached for Tabitha's hand, gripping it firmly. "I know, that's why I came. But your operational security." "Some things matter more than operational security," Thaddeus said, his voice unwavering. "Some things matter more than national defense." The SUV merged onto an interstate heading north from the city. Tabitha watched the Detroit skyline diminish in the side mirror, feeling as though she was departing more than just a location. She was leaving behind 7 years of doubt, disbelief, and defense of a truth she couldn't substantiate. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere secure," Thaddeus answered. "Somewhere we can discuss everything properly." Tabitha settled back in the seat, allowing herself to release the tension she'd been holding for hours, for years, really. Outside the window, the late afternoon sun broke through storm clouds, casting long shadows across the Michigan landscape. For the first time since her father had vanished from her life, Tabitha felt something resembling hope. The secure facility was an unremarkable single-story building nestled in the forests outside Grand Rapids, its mundane exterior concealing sophisticated surveillance systems. As the SUVs pulled into the underground garage, Tabitha noticed the subtle movement of automated cameras tracking their arrival and the reinforced construction of what appeared to be an ordinary garage entrance. Inside, the facility was sparsely decorated but comfortable, a temporary refuge for people who needed to vanish quickly. The operators moved with practiced precision, establishing perimeters and setting up communications while Deputy Director Hammond made several encrypted calls from what appeared to be a command center. Thaddeus guided Tabitha to a small conference room at the facility's rear, away from the operational bustle. For the first time since their reunion, they were relatively private. Without the audience of police detectives, or even his teammates, Thaddeus's military bearing relaxed slightly. He removed his dress jacket, revealing a plain olive shirt underneath and arms marked with the lean muscle of a career soldier. "You must be starving," Thaddeus said, gesturing to a small kitchenette in the corner. "There should be supplies in there." Tabitha shook her head. Food was the furthest thing from her mind. "I want explanations." Thaddeus nodded, taking a seat on the couch across from his daughter. "I know you do. Where should we begin? Why did you leave?" Tabitha asked, the question she'd been harboring for 7 years finally finding expression. "And why did you let Mom believe you had abandoned us?" Thaddeus's eyes, the same deep brown as Tabitha's own, clouded with pain he clearly wasn't used to displaying. "I didn't have an option about leaving. I was selected for an operation so classified that even its existence was known to fewer than 50 people in the government. Division Omega was the military's response to a challenge they'd been avoiding for decades." "What kind of challenge?" "The kind that requires operators who can disappear completely from their previous lives. We handle situations where traditional special forces would be compromised before they even deployed. Deep cover operations in hostile territories where any connection to family or previous identity would mean certain death, not just for the operator, but for everyone they'd ever cared about." Tabitha leaned forward. "But you could have explained something, some reason that wouldn't have destroyed Mom." Pain flickered across Thaddeus's weathered features. "How is she? How is your mother handling all this? How do you think?" Tabitha's voice cracked with sudden rage. "She fell apart completely, quit her nursing job, started seeing a therapist 3 times a week, told everyone who would listen that you'd left her for a younger woman because admitting the truth, that she had no idea where you were, was too devastating to face." Thaddeus closed his eyes briefly, absorbing the full impact of his daughter's words. "I was presented with 2 choices: decline the assignment and remain with my family, or accept and completely sever all previous connections. They made it explicitly clear that any contact whatsoever would compromise both the operation and endanger you." "What kind of choice is that?" "The kind that people in my position are forced to make." Thaddeus's voice was gentle but resolute. "I believed that the missions we were undertaking were protecting countless innocent lives, preventing terrorist attacks, eliminating threats before they could materialize. More important than your own family. Not more important. Different." Thaddeus reached for Tabitha's hand, but she pulled away. "I made the only decision I could live with. One that I believed would keep you and your mother safe from the kind of people we were hunting." The female operator who had accompanied them, the one with the short brown hair, appeared in the doorway. "Colonel, Hammond needs you for the security briefing." Thaddeus nodded. "Give me 5 minutes, Sergeant Morrison." When they were alone again, Thaddeus turned back to his daughter. "I know you're furious. You have every right to be. But I need you to understand something. I never stopped thinking about you." Tabitha looked away, fighting fresh tears. "That doesn't undo what happened." "No." Thaddeus stood. "It doesn't. But we're here now, and I need to know whether you want to try rebuilding something from this point, or if you'd prefer me to disappear again." Tabitha looked up, startled. "You'd leave again? If that's what you wanted." Thaddeus's voice was steady, but his hands betrayed his emotion, clenching slightly at his sides. "I've honored your mother's space for 7 years. I would honor your wishes as well." Tabitha considered this for a long moment. The fury she'd carried for so many years battled with the relief of finally knowing the truth, of being vindicated after so much skepticism. "I want you to see Mom," she finally said. "She deserves to know the truth." Thaddeus nodded slowly. "That can be arranged with appropriate security measures. And I want to understand more about what you do. Not the classified details, just who you are now." A small smile touched Thaddeus's lips. "I think we can manage that." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. Not many people would have defended a truth that everyone else rejected. That requires extraordinary courage." After Thaddeus left for his briefing, Tabitha sat alone in the small room, processing the whirlwind of the day's events. From police interrogation to reunion with her father, it seemed impossible that both had occurred within the same day. She was still sitting there, lost in thought, when Detective Blackwood arrived. The police detective looked distinctly uncomfortable as she was escorted into the room by one of the male operators. "I brought your laptop and personal items," Blackwood said, placing them on the coffee table. "We've been instructed to return all your possessions immediately." Tabitha nodded without speaking. Blackwood lingered, clearly wanting to say more. "I wanted to apologize again for not intervening when Detective Garrison was questioning you. It was completely unprofessional. It was heartless, Tabitha corrected. Yes, it was. Blackwood sat on the edge of the couch. In my defense, I had no idea your father was actually what you claimed. But that's not an excuse. I should have stopped it regardless of whether I believed you. Tabitha studied the detective's face, seeing genuine remorse there. Thank you for saying that. Blackwood handed her a business card. When all this is resolved, if you're ever interested in cybersecurity work with law enforcement, contact me. The department could use people with your technical skills and your integrity. After Blackwood departed, Deputy Director Hammond entered with Thaddeus. He explained that arrangements were being made to bring Tabitha's mother to the facility, where she would be briefed on the situation, at least as much as security protocols would permit. What happens after that? Tabitha asked. Hammond and Thaddeus exchanged glances. That depends on several variables, Hammond said carefully. Your father's cover has been severely compromised, which necessitates significant changes to his assignment. I've requested a transfer to a training position, Thaddeus explained. It would allow for limited family contact while maintaining essential security protocols. And Mom, that will be her decision, Thaddeus said quietly. After 7 years, she may not want me back in her life. The following evening, Tabitha stood on the facility's observation deck, watching as a dark sedan approached along the winding access road. Her heart raced as the car stopped and her mother emerged, looking confused and apprehensive. Catherine Beaumont had aged dramatically in the 7 years since Thaddeus left. Her once vibrant blonde hair now streaked with premature gray, deep lines etched around her eyes and mouth from years of stress and uncertainty. But when she saw Tabitha on the deck, her face illuminated with relief. Tabitha! She rushed forward, embracing her daughter tightly. Are you okay? They told me you were in trouble with the police, but wouldn't explain anything else. I'm fine, Mom, she assured her, returning the embrace. Better than fine, actually. There's someone you need to see. She led her mother inside to the same conference room where she had spoken with her father the day before. Thaddeus stood as they entered, his face carefully composed but unable to hide his anxiety. Catherine froze in the doorway, her expression cycling through shock, confusion, and finally a guarded wariness. Thaddeus. Hello, Catherine, he said softly. It's been too long. For several tense moments no one moved. Then Hammond appeared, gently guiding them all to sit down. Mrs. Beaumont, I understand this is overwhelming. I'm Deputy Director Hammond with the Defense Intelligence Agency. I'm here to explain the circumstances of your husband's absence and why absolute secrecy was essential. The conversation that followed was one Tabitha would remember for the rest of her life. Her mother's initial anger giving way to stunned disbelief as Hammond outlined the classified program that had taken Thaddeus away. The cautious questions about missions that could not be answered. The painful acknowledgement of 7 years lost. When Hammond finished his official explanation and left them alone, the real conversation began. The one about feelings, about trust shattered, and the possibility of rebuilding. It wasn't simple or immediate. Catherine had constructed a life around her husband's abandonment. Learning it was all based on classified necessity didn't instantly heal those wounds. Do you have any idea what the last 7 years have been like? Catherine's voice trembled with barely controlled emotion. Do you know what it's like to wake up every morning wondering if your husband is alive or dead? To have people look at you with pity because they think you've been abandoned. Thaddeus sat silently, absorbing her pain. I became a different person, Catherine continued. I lost myself completely. I couldn't work, couldn't function, couldn't even take care of our daughter properly. And you were just gone. I know, Thaddeus said quietly. I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back 7 years of my life. The room fell silent except for Catherine's quiet sobbing. Tabitha felt torn between her parents, understanding both perspectives but unable to bridge the chasm between them. 4 months later, Tabitha stood on the porch of yet another house, a modest 2-story home in a quiet suburb of Colorado Springs that served as their new residence. Security considerations had required another relocation, but the stable neighborhood setting had its benefits. As she watched a familiar black SUV approach down the tree-lined street, she felt a sense of equilibrium that had been missing for 7 years. Her mother joined her, looking healthier than she had in years. The haunted expression in her eyes had been replaced by something closer to acceptance, if not complete healing. Thaddeus stepped out of the vehicle in civilian clothes, khakis and a polo shirt instead of his uniform. The family's reconciliation was still delicate, fragile, but healing had genuinely begun. Thaddeus's transfer to an instructor role meant he was home 4 days each week. More stability than any of them had experienced in years. Over dinner, they discussed ordinary things. Tabitha's college applications, Catherine's return to nursing at a local hospital, the adjustments to their new life. The conversation flowed more naturally now, though certain subjects remained off limits by necessity. "Can you tell me anything about what you do now?" Tabitha asked as they cleaned up together. "Not everything," Thaddeus admitted, "but I can tell you I'm preparing the next generation, teaching them what I've learned about survival and protection." "Including women?" Thaddeus smiled. "Especially women. The program has evolved significantly. Do you ever regret it?" Tabitha asked the question that had haunted her for months. "Choosing that life over us? Every single day," Thaddeus answered honestly, "and never not once. Both can be true simultaneously." As they settled in the living room for a movie, their first normal family evening in 7 years, Tabitha noticed how her father still positioned himself facing the door, how his eyes continuously scanned for potential threats. "Some habits never fade. You know," Tabitha said softly, "next time someone doesn't believe me about you, I'm just going to smile and let them think whatever they want." Thaddeus smiled. "The strongest people I know never needed anyone to believe in them. They just needed to believe in themselves." Tabitha's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Detective Blackwood, checking in as she had every few weeks since that day in the interrogation room. This message contained something new, an offer of a summer internship with the Detroit Police Department's cybercrime unit when she turned 18. "We need more people who stand by the truth even when no one believes them," the message read. Tabitha looked up at her father, the man whose existence had been denied, whose service had been mocked, whose sacrifice had gone unrecognized. In that moment, she understood something about strength that no classroom could teach. Some heroes never seek recognition, but deserve it more than anyone.